Today we're going to be talking about 8 wide receiver tips that you must know. So how this video will go down is we're going to explain some of the most common mistakes that wide receivers will make and how you can improve those specific mistakes. So the first mistake we're going over is the stance and the start of a wide receiver. So whenever a wide receiver gets in their stance, there's 2 things that you want to try to avoid. Number 1, you want to try to avoid being too upright. A lot of times wide receivers will stand, and I love that you guys are relaxed, but they will stand straight up in the air, legs extended, so when they have to take off the ball, they either take a false step with their front foot or they have to dip down to explode out. And that is going to waste a bunch of time off the line of scrimmage. Now, the second thing that wide receivers will do with their stance is they will be insanely wide, almost like their back foot is flat off of the ground. Now, the issue with this when your back foot is flat is that you're probably going to have to take an extra punch step to be able to get off the ball. And again, that takes too much time. That's like a false step. So what you want to do, a good gauge for every wide receiver off the line, is you want to try to be in a 90-90 degree stance. You want to try to be at a 90-degree angle with your front foot and 90-degree angle with your back foot. Because when you're in this 90-90 position, you have some weight on this front foot, you can explode off the ball and get off the ball fast with little to no wasted motion. The second mistake that wide receivers will make at the top of the break is dragging their feet on cuts. So whether that's a route, like let's say for example it's a curl route, wide receivers will run up, let's say the quarterback's to my left, I'm breaking towards the quarterback. A lot of wide receivers will reach out, they'll drag their back foot for balance, all this turf pops up in the air, or even when they're breaking on a route like a post route, they'll reach and they'll drag this back foot. So the reason why you don't want to drag at the top of the route is just simply not needed, right? When you guys cut, usually that drag, people use it for balance, right? And again, they do it honestly, probably subconsciously. They'll cut, but because their foot is so far outside of their frame, they don't have any balance. So they drag to be able to get that balance back. If they did not drag their foot and they cut outside their frame, they would get stuck at the break and they would be just flat out slow at the break. So you simply just do not need the drag if you have good cutting mechanics. Now, what can you do to prevent this drag of your foot? And we're going to talk about that. So when you guys get into the break point, an easy way to prevent this drag is by cutting on the ball of your foot. You do not want to reach out, and if you're making contact with your heel first and your toe is slapping down, that's when your foot's outside your frame. Now, I'm not saying that you just want to cut on your tippy toes, but when you cut, you want to try to strike the ground with the ball of the foot first. If your heel hits the ground second, you're usually inside of your frame and you're in an explosive position to where you could just open up and drive out. Now, the other thing that ties into not dragging at the break is going to be your pad level. So what do I mean by pad level? But before we get into pad level, you guys, if you're a receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, we're coming out to 15 different cities across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. We already had our first camp in San Francisco, California. Then we'll be coming out to Miami, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, Buffalo, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California. So if you're a receiver and you would like to train with myself, my staff of coaches, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. Now, another way that you could prevent dragging at the top of the break is with your pad level, like we mentioned earlier. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of wide receivers will end up cutting outside of their frame and drag this back foot simply because they raise their chest up, they almost lean back because they're just trying to almost like over-exaggerate the cut. Like they're trying to sell it, for example. Like let's say I got a DB who's in off coverage and I'm trying to fake him in this direction to run a post. They'll run up and they'll over-exaggerate this cut. Their chest will raise up, their chin will raise up, and when you lean back, that foot automatically is going to be outside your frame, and that's why guys will drag their feet, which is something called an indicator. Anytime that you raise your pad level up, your hips rise up. A DB in off-man coverage, press-man coverage, he is going to be watching our hips. So anytime that he sees me raise up, he is going to sit on the route. So we have to make sure that we maintain good pad level, and that will also help us get rid of the drag. So if you guys can focus on cutting on the ball of your foot, and when you run your routes, keep your chin tucked. You don't need to be down like here by your chest, but keep your chin down and keep your chest slightly ahead of your waist, because if you can do that when you cut, there is no need for a drag. We can be explosive and just get in and out of this break. Now, the next mistake that wide receivers will make at the top of the route is going to be when dropping their hips, they will drift forward and take an unnecessary amount of steps. So let's say, for example, my quarterback is to the left, I have to run a comeback route to the right. I'm pushing vertical, I'm braking, I cut, but I'm almost drifting drifting forward, taking a bunch of choppy steps, increasing the time spent at the top of the break. We obviously want to get in and out of the break with the least amount of steps possible, but most importantly, the least amount of time spent possible. So when I get up into the break, you guys want to think about not necessarily just dropping, because everybody knows you have to get a low center of gravity, right? At the break point to change direction, I got to make sure that I drop. But a lot of wide receivers drop incorrectly. When they drop, it'll almost be their chest, their nose will go past their knees. And when your chest and nose go past your knees and you're selling vertical up into a route, that's going to cause you to drift forward. So what you want to think about doing is bringing your chest to your quad, right? You don't want to bring chin to your toes, chin to your knee. You want to think chest to quad. And if you could touch your chest to your quad, that is obviously going to drop your butt down, and that's going to put you in a more explosive position to make a sharper cut. So we don't want to go up into this break and be here leaning forward. We want to go up into this break and sit down, chest to quad, almost like your hands are going to touch your heels. If you can get to that position, that will help you make a much sharper cut at the top of the break. The next mistake that wide receivers will make is they will have this football bounce off of their palms when they catch the ball, and that prevents them from having quote unquote soft hands. So a lot of times wide receivers coming over the middle, like a bullet pass will be thrown to them, a low pass, a high pass, and you'll hear this really loud noise, right? And that's usually from wide receivers catching the ball all with their palms and not staying in the quote unquote webbing of their hands, aka your fingers, right? A lot of wide receivers also will try to catch the ball with their fingertips. They'll overdo it, I'm saying, and that's a great way to jam your fingers. So if you guys can focus on catching the ball in the webbing of your hand, having that soft hands ability, it'll make it much easier for you guys to catch a pass over the middle, a bullet pass, a low pass, any type of pass. So do not let that palm hit the ball. Now, something you can do as a wide receiver to work on that is going to be strengthening your grip. So doing exercises like fingertip push-ups, grabbing maybe two heavy dumbbells and doing something called farmer's carry. If you have a strong grip, it makes life a lot easier and it makes your hands a lot softer when catching a pass. The next mistake that a lot of wide receivers will make off the line of scrimmage against a press coverage DB is looking back for the ball too early. So a lot of wide receivers will line up like so. Let's say, for example, I got to run a fade route, right? This usually happens on a fade route, but let's say I'm in the middle of the field. This is not a goal line fade situation. This is not a red zone fade situation. Let's say I'm the 40-yard line. We got 60 yards to go score. So I'm lined up here. I got a DB inside shade press. I give him a move, but after I give him this move, guys, you have to be focused on separating from the DB. I don't want to just get separation with my release and then lose separation by looking back for the ball too early. Guys, the quarterback is not going to throw a fade ball, let's say a deep fade ball or a deep streak, a deep go, right after you make your release. He's going to lead you downfield. He's going to put the ball to a spot, and our job is to get to that spot. So trust that the quarterback can put it there. Let's keep my head down, let's pump my arms, and let's go win the race to the spot. So what I would say is after you give this move to a DB, you should have your head down, pump your arms, and try to go for at least 10 to 15 yards, as that will help you separate from the DB and actually catch up to the spot that the quarterback will put the ball to. Now, the next mistake that wide receivers will make leading up into a top of their route or leading into a break is they will shorten up their stride length. So this is much easier said than done, but this is a common problem that a lot of wide receivers have, and we're going to talk about how you can fix this problem. But let's say, for example, I got to run like a, let's say it's like maybe a 15-yard comeback. Again, let's use that example. So the quarterback is lined up to the left of me. I have to run a comeback. Leading up to the break, I should be able to maintain the exact same stride at 5 yards of this route all the way up to 15 yards of this route. A lot of wide receivers, because they are not confident in their break, or maybe they are not confident in the step that they are breaking off of, will run up, and then when they get to about 13 yards, their strides go from this to this because they're preparing and trying to slow themselves down to make the break easier. Now, why is that a problem? Because guys, on every single route, we were trying to get a DB to backpedal, open up his hips, and bail the hell out of there. We were trying to sell a go, we were trying to sell a fade route. Everything is a fade until it's not a fade. So you shortening your strides tells that DB it's not a fade. He's gonna go from this to settling and being ready to drive on our route to lock us up. So we have to get comfortable breaking in full stride. Now, like I said, much easier said than done. So what you can do to work on this is in practice, try to run your routes off of steps. So if you run your routes off of steps, let's say, for example, a comeback at like 12 yards, let's say 15 yards, it's gonna be off of something called your fifth or your fourth inside step. So let's say it's my fourth inside step. Set, go, I come off. That's my first inside. second inside, third inside, fourth inside, I drop. And when you get more comfortable running routes off of steps like that, even in a game, if you don't even have that step count in your head, it makes it easier to cut in stride. You're more comfortable cutting in stride when you're cutting off of steps when doing drill work. Now, another thing, a lot of people struggle cutting in stride because they lack ankle stability and leg strength. So doing exercises in the gym that are all single leg based can help with that, because it's very, very tough at a high speed, full stride, to be able to just cut on a dime and get out of the break. If you guys are running at that type of speed, it requires some stability and it requires some strength in your single leg. So doing a lot of one-legged exercises, like let's say split squats, anything that involves jumping off of one leg, all those things can translate to your route running and help you sell vertical as long as possible on your break. Now, another mistake that wide receivers will make leading up into their break is dropping their eyes to look for the yardage that they are cutting at. So for example, like let's say I have to run like a 15-yard comeback and I got to break at 15, obviously. A lot of wide receivers will be running their route, they'll be pushing vertical, and on every single route, we're trying to make the DB think we're running deep. We're trying to make him think we're running past him, trying to get him to backpedal, open up his hips. So my eyes sell vertical just as much as my stride, my speed, and my body language. So if I'm coming off here and I'm looking straight up and then that DB sees me start to look down because I'm searching for the yardage of the route, that is a very, very easy mistake. So now how can you correct that as a wide receiver? And honestly, that comes from running routes over and over and over again to where it is engraved in your head and you know the exact step and the exact timing to break. Guys, like obviously, like you guys all know that we're not supposed to look down on a route, but a lot of guys don't emphasize that or apply that to their actual game because they don't rep it enough. You should be repping routes on an actual turf field or with cones, and you should be seeing that cone, seeing that yard line out of your peripherals so we could get comfortable with that in a game. You got to rep out the exact routes that are in your playbook for this to work, right? You cannot be repping out just a bunch of different routes that you're never going to actually run. Train the routes that you will be running as a receiver in your game, in your offensive playbook, so you don't end up dropping your eyes in a live game scenario. The next mistake we're going to be going over for wide receivers is their arms dying out of the break. So like let's say for example I'm running like a comeback route. Let's use that example again. I'm running up to the break. A lot of wide receivers will break down because they're so concerned with stopping themselves and so concerned with decelerating, their arms are going to die. They'll almost like briefcase it at the top of the break. Or some guys will have their arms go wide as like a source of balance when they're trying to get out of the route. We do not want to do that. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is a lot of wide receivers will be told beat the drum or have really fast, like almost like foot fire hands. So you get into the break, they'll say beat the drum, but all that's going to do is create extra steps at the top of the route. So it's going to be just as slow as you having your hands die, because when your hands die, your feet die. So the best advice I can give to you to fix this problem of not having your feet die, your hands go super fast, taking extra steps, keep your hands natural, right? Guys, when we're running routes, what slows us down is not my hands. What slows us down is not my feet. It is going to be your hips and you changing direction. Your feet can help you get out, your hands can help you get out, but that's not what slows us down. So we don't need to have my hands die at the top of the break. So I get up into this comeback route, I want my hands to stay natural. I want to run in and I want to run out. Do not make that mistake of having your hands die, because your hands die, your feet die, and that break point will be slow.